Hello ladies and gentlemen, Richard Dick Coughlan, 616. A couple of months ago, I uploaded a video called A Christian Homophobe Tastes the Dick, in which dealt with a paper released by an organisation called the FRC, which dealt with the top 10 myths about homosexuality, which I thoroughly thrashed and gave a good arse raping, ironically. But it seems that the FRC are back in business with more bullshit, so I figured it's time for me to do another takedown. You know, audacity can be defined in a way that suggests that if someone gets away with one thing and no one calls them out on it, they'll probably do it again and again and again. The more they'll get away with it even further, and the further they'll push it. You need to keep this in mind whilst looking at the Family Research Council's website. You'll notice a good example of this when they're discussing the idea of defending DOMA, which is the Defence of Marriage Act. In other words, kick gays out of anything we don't like act. Recently in America, the Justice Department decided that they would no longer defend DOMA, and full credit to the FRC, they've decided to use this opportunity to their advantage in order to raise some fucking money. But in attacking the decision not to defend DOMA and gay marriage in general, the FRC has used their page and their website to push some really antiquated, outdated and vile and disgusting arguments against gay marriage. Ironically, none of them have anything to do with gay marriage though. Now, in all fairness, the FRC have been called out in the past, most notably by the Southern Poverty Law Centre, who have recently labelled them a hate group because they have a habit of deliberately distorting research and promoting very awful anti-gay propaganda. Two sections of that webpage, mainly the 10 arguments from social science against gay marriage and the Q&A as to what's wrong with allowing same-sex couples to marry, are rife with distortions. For this video, I'm going to be focusing on the Q&A section for the what's wrong with letting same-sex couples marry. Now, the following passage I'm going to read to you from the website, and it's a perfect example of the FRC taking the low road. Do homosexuals pose a threat to children? Homosexual men are far more likely to engage in child sex abuse than heterosexuals. The evidence for this lies in the findings. Almost all child sex abuse is committed by men. Who they're fucking clearly doesn't matter. Less than 3% of American men identify themselves as homosexual, yet nearly a third of all cases of child abuse are homosexual in nature. This is a rate of homosexual child abuse about 10 times higher than you would expect based on the first two facts. Yeah, because paedophiles are so fucking picky, aren't they? These figures are essentially undisputed. However, pro-homosexual activists seek to explain them away by claiming that men who molest boys are usually not homosexual in their adult sexual orientation. Yet a study of convicted child molesters published in the Archives of Sexual Behaviour found that 86% of offenders against males describe themselves as homosexual or bisexual. W.D. Erickson, Archives in Homosexual Behaviour from 1988. This does not mean that all or even most homosexual men are child molesters, but we can't be too careful. But it does prove that homosexuality is a significant risk for this horrible crime. Yes, that's right, ladies and gentlemen, they're pulling the old homosexual equals paedophile routine, which is so vomit-inducingly fucking bigoted, I find it almost laughable that I have to sit here and constantly fucking defend against it. Well, according to the religious right watchdog, Box Turtle Bulletin, the study of behaviour in patterns in child molesters by W.D. Erickson, which appeared more than 20 years ago, didn't set out to determine the sexual orientation of child molesters. The study of 229 convicted child molesters in Minnesota, which by the way was never intended as a national representative anyway, was focused on the types of sexual contact that men engaged in with their victims, vaginal or anal penetration, oral contact and so forth. In this particular sample, 63 victims were male and 166 victims were female, but the finding is encapsulated in just one sentence. 86% of offenders against males described themselves as homosexual or bisexual. Also, the authors of the book never actually made the claim that 86% of men who abused children said they were gay or bisexual. This is not the first time the FRC has distorted the Erickson study. Last year, the FRC head spokesman Tony Perkins cited it on MSNBC's Hardball as proof that the organisation was not targeting homosexuals. However, much more credible sources like the American Psychological Association and the National Association of Social Workers, or the American Academy of Child Psychiatrists, and the Child Welfare League of America, all say that gay men are not more likely to commit acts of child molestation. However, if you were to ask anyone in the FRC this, they would just say that they were infiltrated by the gay mafia. And it's weird that the FRC have chosen to go down this road again, because in the past it's got them in a lot of fucking trouble. In 1992, A. Nicholas Grove, who was a former director of the Sex Offenders Programme in Connecticut, complained that his work was being distorted by members of the FRC. In particular, Timothy Daly. He even wrote a letter to Daly which reads in part, "If you are in fact familiar with my research, you must realise that my studies have indicated that homosexual males pose less of a risk of sexual harm to children, both male and female, from both an absolute and a percentage incident rate than heterosexual males. Your statement that evidence indicates that disproportionate number of gays seek adolescent males or boys as sexual partners appears to come from the assumption that if an adult male is attracted to a male child, this adult male's sexual orientation is ipso facto homosexual. Since your report is, in my view, misrepresents the facts of what we know about this matter from the scientific investigation and does not indicate that my studies on this topic reach conclusions diametrically opposed to yours, I would appreciate it if you removed any reference of my work in your paper, lest it appear to the reader that my research supports your views." And the homosexuality equals paedophilia argument is not the only distortion that the FRC is using in this Q&A section. The organisation is also making the claim that gay men are not monogamous and therefore cannot handle the concept of marriage. Yeah, it's beyond your control. Among homosexual men in particular, casual sex, rather than committed relationships, is the rule and not the exception. Do you think maybe the fact you've never allowed them to get married could fucking contribute to that? And even when they do enter into a more committed relationship, it is usually of relatively short duration. For example, a study of homosexual men in the Netherlands... Oh yeah, the Netherlands, yeah, the Dutch. Yeah, it's wrong to generalise. The first country in the world to legalise same-sex marriage, published in the journal AIDS in 2003, found the average length of a steady partnership was no more than 2 years. This study was conducted by a woman called Maria Zaduru. It has been pointed out to the FRC on numerous occasions that Zaduru's study cannot be used to gauge the correct interpretation of gay marriage, because her study did not actually look at gay marriage. It was actually designed to, and I quote, "access the relative contribution of steady and casual partnerships to the incidence of HIV infection among homosexual men in Amsterdam and to determine the effect of increasing sexually risky behaviours among both types of partnerships in the era of highly active antiretroviral therapy." For this study, Dr. Ziradou received their information from the Amsterdam cohort study of human immunodeficiency virus, HIV, and AIDS among homosexual men. To gain this information, researchers studied 1,800 gay men over the course of 16 years, between 1984 and the year 2000. Same-sex marriage was legalised in the Netherlands in 2001, thus making all the information in that study irrelevant for the FRC's case. Furthermore, lesbians were not included in the actual fucking study, and they should be included in everything, as much as possible. The FRC's other proof for the promiscuity of gay men is the National Health and Social Life Survey published in 1994. Do you have anything in the last 10 fucking years? The most baffling part of the FRC's Q&A section on this website is the following, which I have copied and pasted and left in the anus bar. Briefly summarised, it goes like this. For more information on the harmful consequences of homosexual behaviour, see the following publications by the Family Research Council's Senior Fellow for Marriage and Family Studies, Dr. Timothy J. Daly. These include Dark Obsession, Homosexuality and Child Sex Abuse, the Negative Health Effects of Homosexuality, and Homosexual Parenting, Placing Children at Risk. All of the links that they place here, if you click on them, it goes to a web page saying this article no longer exists. The reason those articles no longer exist is because the Family Research Council themselves removed them in 2008, stating that they were outdated and no longer usable. The FRC then even have the nerve to incite the gay men are inflicted with gay bowel syndrome. Gay bowel syndrome, for those who don't know, is this archaic medical term that physicians no longer use. It's the diagnostic equivalent of you going to the doctors and him giving you a box of fucking leeches. And I wonder whether the FRC would really want to defend DOMA in a court with this bullshit, which can be debunked by someone like me. But I wouldn't be surprised if they do, because short of the Southern Poverty Law Centre and a couple of other people who write blogs, which I'll link to in the below bar, nobody has actually had the gall in the mainstream media to really call these fuckers out yet. This is why they continue to push this bullshit over and over again. Tony Perkins is able to appear on programmes like Fox and publications like the Daily Caller, where he repeats these lies ad nauseum, and he's been freely able to repeat this bullshit in front of legislative bodies. So it shouldn't be any surprise that the FRC have their website in which they spout the same bollocks that they've already decided wasn't any good until they needed it again. And don't be surprised when you see these lies being repeated again by someone like Congressman Mike Pence or presidential candidates like Mike Huckabee. Because so few people have the gall to challenge their audacity. But if you're going to challenge them, I say challenge them with this. A guy called Reverend Grant Storms, yes, Reverend Grant Storms, a Christian and a prominent, outspoken hate monger when it comes to gay rights and gay issues, a monumental homophobe, was caught masturbating in his car next to a children's playground. You people sicken me. Richard the Dick Coughlan, 616. Good night, may God be less.